Hello, and thank you for joining us for our monthly Meet a Member segment. This week, Tanya Subatang, Membership Manager for CFA Society San Francisco, interviews Sylvia Kwan, CIO of Ellevest and founder of SimplySmart Asset Management. Sylvia is a CFA Society San Francisco member and has been featured as a forever influential woman in business as named by the San Francisco Business Times. Please enjoy this illuminating interview where they discuss diversity in the industry, workplace changes due to COVID, and the future of the investment community.
First question, we'll keep it easy for this one, but in an interview, you had mentioned your father quit his engineering job to take as a hobby for trading stocks full time. Was he an inspiration to you getting to the industry, or what got you into the investment industry?
It was actually quite the opposite. Not because I purposely chose not to, but you might. I don't know how it is in your family, but culturally, in our family, at least, it was important, especially for my parents who were immigrants, to have like that steady job, like with the established corporation, just keep your head down, work hard, and, you'll be successful. And so when my father changed careers and became a stockbroker, she basically felt that was like no better than being like a used car salesman. And so she admonished my brother and I, like, don't do whatever you want, but don't follow in your dad's footsteps. And so I'm like, whatever, you're a kid, like, what do you know? Right. So I'm like, okay, fine. Like, it doesn't, I really didn't have any like ambitions of doing so. And so it was a surprise to have ended up where I am. And I also, my undergraduate degree is actually in computer science. So I actually had planned to go into the computer industry and ended up. So I do think it is in my DNA, actually following in my dad's footsteps, although it was, it's a different time and a different place. But yeah, so that's my story.
I completely understand what, I think you and I can both share the same cultural background in that, stick with a job that is easy to understand, right? Easy to just put your head down and work. So, with that being said, you are currently the CIO for Ellevest and the founder and CEO for SimplySmart Asset. I mean, those are quite big achievements. What is your advice for women or anybody really desiring to become a CIO?
So I think that being a CIO requires just wearing a lot of different hats. And so my advice would be to gain as much experience as possible that's outside of your current area of expertise. And I think a lot of us who have CFAs, very analytical, very research oriented, and so you're really really an expert in kind of a particular area. But I think beyond that, I would encourage people to get as much direct client experience and interaction as possible. Find as many opportunities as possible to really use and hone your communication skills, find ways inside your company to get more involved in like strategic initiatives, either within your business area or even at the company level, find opportunities to lead, even if it's a very small project, because I found that as a CIO, having just the investment expertise is just not enough. You really need those great communication skills, the client skills, business development. It's basically a much broader perspective and a set of skills.
Thank you. I mean, that's a great feedback to have, right? Because a lot of people assume it's one path and never kind of realize it's a whole different facet of experiences.
Yes, exactly.
So being the CIO for Ellevest, and again, congratulations to your team for hitting the $1 billion
Thank you.
mark. Big deals,
it is.
Women power. Why do you think it's important for companies like Ellevest to exist?
I think it's really important for companies like Ellevest because Ellevest was founded really to increase access to and also encourage more participation in investing by individuals who, especially those who are new to investing or simply not engaged with investing. I mean, that's, kind of the mission of Ellevest. So it's interesting that the data the data shows that only, I think, roughly half of US households have investments in the stock market. And it's typically, those who with lower incomes or people of color, women, younger people who don't participate in the markets. And so, my belief is since long-term investing is really a means for building wealth over the long term, it's really important for firms like Ellevest and others to provide the solutions and the access to investing that's for everyone, and to really continue to work to break down these barriers to investing.
So we know that the pandemic, and just to kind of follow up your key point of kind of bridging the gap, we know that the 2020 pandemic has kind of caused a backwards motions for a lot of women, right? Like many of us are working moms who had to make a decision, stay at home with the kids because schools were closed down, or somehow juggling motherhood and entertaining your toddler or kindergartner. In your opinion, what do you think we should do as a society to kind of help bridge that gap? Or, are we too far gone? Or maybe, we aren't, and it's just a hiccup, and, maybe in a couple of months we'll bounce back. Like, what are your thoughts on those?
It is really unfortunate that the pandemic has kind of turned into a she session. And we have definitely heard from so many women whose, finances have been damaged, or, who have had to leave the workforce. And so it does feel like it's a really big setback for women in the workforce. I generally an optimist, and so I'm hopeful that once we're kind of on this other side, and schools are finally open, and there is access to things like daycare, I'm hopeful, and I also do believe that there could be a silver lining in the sense that all of this remote work has kind of opened the eyes of corporations that, hey, people can have flexible work schedules. They can work from home and be just as productive, if not more productive. And I think that kind of flexibility is going to be really helpful for women. So, my hope is that, once we've got, most people vaccinated and things, start to really open up, that those women who did have to leave the workforce now, if their kids can, get back to daycare or school, that they'll actually have more potential opportunities because of the potential flexibility in remote working. So that's my silver lining and hope for that, but we'll have to see whether that comes to pass or not.
Well, I think it's a great positive outlook. That is something I've read so many articles, and it has been a great conversation piece, from everybody. Like Google is extending their remote access for their employees, companies such as that. And to your point, I think there is a lot more investigating for companies to look at the flexibility of work. What is that? What is the new norm? What is that going to look like?
Exactly.
So I share the same sentiment. I think we will kind of see this on the other side. Having said that, now you've worked in the industry for quite some time.
Yes.
You're wiser. That's all I'm saying, is that you're far wiser and seen more. What are some changes that have you seen that are positive, and what are some things you think the industry still needs to and the community needs to work on?
Yeah. So, gosh, it has been a long time. But I do think there have really been a significant number of positive changes that are really encouraging. The first thing that always comes to mind is, how much fees have come down. Fees have decreased significantly. Trading commissions, when my dad used to be a stockbroker, they used to be hundreds of dollars per trade, right? And now, you can trade for $0. So that's a huge reduction in just the cost of investing. Plus there's the creation of ETFs and index funds that have really provided a means for individual investors to invest, to build wealth, in a very diversified and low cost manner. I think the rise of digital investing, so companies like Ellevest and others like Ellevest have provided kind of, just average individual investors with a way to invest that's more similar to what used to be institutional investing. And so I think overall, just the growth of technology and technology advances in financial services has brought kind of institutional style investing accessible to individual investors. So I think that's a huge positive that we've seen over the last couple of decades. What do we need to improve on? Well, certainly I'd say we need to improve on the representation of women and people of color in the financial industry. So that's definitely one thing. And the second thing I think is something that's just been an issue for a long time. And that's, we need to improve on building trust in the industry. Financial services, year after year, I see the survey, it still has the lowest trust with its clients compared to all other industries. It's always at the bottom, which is really unfortunate because it's always going to be like a few bad players that, make the headlines. And so I think there's a lot that we can do to really build up more trust in our industry.
What do you think, just to follow up on that, what do you think can a investor, financial planner do to gain trust with their clients and build the industry? Maybe more regulations, more open book conversations with clients, or education?
I think more transparency, and we're moving in that direction. When I think about fee transparency and how opaque that used to be. But I think you hit upon education is also one of them. A lot of times, clients don't even know what questions to ask. If they don't know even what questions to ask, then, you can be really transparent, but, there still may be this kind of distrust. So I think it's a lot of things. It's helping clients be more informed, for sure. It's, being transparent about what you do and how much you charge. And so I think, it's interesting. I do think that, relationship building is a big part of that, building that trust. And that's where I really think women have a distinct advantage over men. Just, I'm talking very generalizations here, that women generally are more empathic than men are. And I think that's really important in building those client relationships. And so I feel, hey, if we can get, more women, in the industry and have, a different skill set, that could certainly go some ways in building those relationships of trust.
I think your comment, to kind of paraphrase, correct me if I'm wrong if I'm paraphrasing correctly, but kind of putting women's strength and being more empathetic to others is such a great reminder, right? Because usually in a workforce, that is something that was looked down upon, women being emotional. So for you to kind of bring that up, I think it's such a huge admission that we as women should be embracing. So,
yep, 100%. 100%. And I think especially given the challenges of the pandemic, it is even more important. I think empathy is even a more important skill because we've all had our, I can't imagine anybody on this planet who hasn't had some challenges, with respect to, the pandemic. And, I found that leaders who are empathic and who really kind of, express that empathy for, their team, as well as other characteristics. But I think that's an important one for a leader, especially in challenging times like this one.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So just switching a little bit more on regards to educating, clients. One of the big, for the lack of a better term, trends, and I know you had mentioned in an interview that I saw that key differentiator for Ellevest was impact investing. So where do you see impact investing will take place in the next 5-10 years, and how influential is that to an individual who's wanting to invest? And how do you suppose the 2020 pandemic has affected impact investing?
I actually think it's been very positive. I think that it's accelerated the trend that was already beginning before the pandemic into impact investing. And that's really because, when the pandemic started, right, there was so much heightened awareness of how companies, treat their customers, how they treat their employees, how they engage with the community, lots of eyes on them. And so it really kind of raised the visibility of, what is the responsibility, what responsibility do companies have in this kind of global challenge, right? And so I think both consumers, ourselves as consumers and also as investors have demanded more as a result of that. Like, show me, even the civil unrest that we experienced, so much of last year, there's a lot of investors like, it's one thing to say, you are, you plan, you are all for diversity and inclusion, but I want to see how you're moving in that direction, right? So I think the pandemic kind of just raised the visibility of the importance of these issues. And so I don't think it's a trend, like just a popular trend that's going to go away. I think the pandemic accelerated it. I think there's more and more interest in impact investing, especially from women and also younger generations like yourselves. And so, those are powerful trends that I don't think are going away. And I'm super excited about kind of the increasing amount of investments that kind of fall into this situation. So I think it's I'm very optimistic about it.
I think that you hit it right on the nail when you're saying that now a lot of the younger generations like myself is not just saying, I want to know what the return of the money is, right? I want to know, are you offsetting carbon footprint? Are you planting trees in the Amazon? Or are we recycling and things like that? And how do you think companies will, we talked about it's kind of fast tracking them. Do you think that we'll kind of see companies owning up to it in a much faster rate? And how can we educate clients to kind of, or maybe not clients so much because they're the ones asking for it, but the financial planners and saying, guys, this is important, because I think I read somewhere that only like 14% are actually, taking these, impact investing into heart and educating their clients for it. So what do you think needs to happen? Who do you think has to have the bigger voice? Do you think there should be a certain type of, governance surrounding it? Like, how can we move this forward or so?
I think there's several ways. Certainly there's regulation, which we're seeing more of. And I think under the Biden administration, we'll probably see more, but even, just not even at the federal level, but, California, for example, mandating, women on boards and things like that. So I think there's regulation that will move the needle somewhat, to all companies, whether they're excited about it or not. But I do think the other thing, so besides regulation, I think demand is going to move the needle. And I think, obviously, money is going to be a big motivator, unfortunately. For some people, obviously, our younger generations, it's not always about money, but I think probably for folks in our generation, it's maybe a little bit more about money. But it is interesting because that's, I hadn't heard that statistic. So I really like that one. But we have seen a number of clients come to Ellevest because their old advisor just didn't listen to them or didn't, they said, hey, I'm really interested in, a low carbon portfolio or whatever. And the advisor heard them, but then didn't do anything about it. So I think if there are more situations like that, where the advisor is actually losing business because they're not paying attention to them, that's what's going to make them pay attention. So I think asking again more about this, demanding more from our industry, I think is going to help. And then also, I think going back to your comment about education is informing that this actually is could be a really great way to invest. And so we do have some clients who come, and when we talk about sort of the impact investments that we offer, sometimes they'll say, wow, I didn't realize that I could invest, for returns and to make a positive impact. And that's when you kind of see the engagement and you see that, wow, they're just kind of, their face lights up. So I think that, there's not just one thing that's going to do it. I think it's a combination of all of these things working together that will help move the needle. But it's going to take a while. I don't expect miracles.
You never know, but yeah, I'm excited to see how that's going to impact it, moving forward, because I think everything we decide now with electric cars and being more aware of the waste and the environment and global warming, those, since in my generation, has been so prominent. So I'm so excited to see it being really touched upon in some, like the retail industry, and now into the investment industry, how that's kind of impacting the decisions these companies are making. So it's great to see. So what do you think the future looks like for women in the industry?
Well, I'm hopeful. And I would say maybe cautiously optimistic. I know we discussed there are still too few women in the industry across all the functions. And so I think historically, the financial industry hasn't been that welcoming to women. I'm hopeful that if it changes to become more welcome to women, I think that could certainly attract more women to our industry. I do think, since we were just talking about sort of ESG and impact investing, that I do think the growth in that area is going to actually attract more women, because I've noted that so many of the panels, the webinars and things like that are around ESG and impact investing have a lot of women on those panels. And so I feel like, well, gosh, that's something that, obviously is very attractive to women in our industry. And so I'm hopeful that a push in that direction will increase the attractiveness of our industry to women. So that's my silver lining, I guess, for that. But again, it is, very male dominated. So it will take some time to change, but I'm hopeful that it will change.
I think so too. Well, with that being said, so we know what we want for the future. What is your advice for young women coming into the industry? There are some that we're seeing a good influx, but to your point, we still got a long way to catch up. But what is your advice for them?
Don't give up is my advice. I know, it's interesting. I think I read a statistic where people coming into the industry, it's roughly 50-50, but then women drop off sort of, during their career. And sometimes it's, to raise a family and things like that, and whether they come back or not. But, I would say, yes, our industry is male dominated. But I would encourage women not to believe the myth that in order to be successful in the financial services industry, you have to be aggressive, you have to be competitive, and you have to be more like your male counterpart, male peers. I don't think that's true. And this kind of going back to kind of what we had discussed earlier, I think that there are certain qualities that are generally associated with women that are big advantages in our industry. So we've talked about one of them, empathy, in terms of, women in general being more, being able to express more empathy, better listeners in some sense. And that is really, really key to building very strong relationships with clients. I would say a second thing, the data shows that women are generally better at identifying and managing risk and downside. Better at managing downside risk, which I think, especially in our industry, is really key. So I think my advice would be really to embrace, kind of what's unique about you and also what's unique about our gender. Instead of seeing them as weaknesses, turn them into advantages for your career.
I love that. I love the whole embracing who we are. Let's not change for a male counterpart because we're completely different from them. We have our own strengths. This is why you have men and female, right?
That's right.
Because there's two different strengths. So tell me, who inspired you? Who inspires you and why? And is it someone in the industry, outside? Who inspires you? So
I would say, the person who comes to mind, in terms of, my career is one of my dissertation advisors, and also a co-founder of the first startup company that I joined was William Sharp, winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics. So I feel so fortunate to have worked with him both in an academic setting when I was in graduate school and also in a business setting. And he, I would say, really inspired just by example. And so although he was, always the smartest person in the room, he was also the most humble. And so he was never afraid to, ask questions and show vulnerability, which I was just really surprised, and that really stuck with me. Instead of delegating, which he could easily get, a bunch of research students to do, the grunt work, he always rolled up his sleeves and did the hard work. And so I really learned from him to both kind of approach my work with humility and an open mind. And I can always learn something. And also really doing the hard work yourself really has helped me build kind of a foundation of expertise going forward. And so I credit him with a lot of just, it wasn't like he was my mentor or anything like that. It was just, in our, my interaction with him and observing how he behaved, and, whether it's in meetings or what have you, was really inspiring for me.
I love that. I love those key takeaways of, role, no matter where you are, right, in roles and title, rolling up your sleeve and keeping it humble. That definitely goes a long way. So that's so endearing to hear. So I know I asked for only 30 minutes, so we have about one more minute here. So I have to ask, what are some of your passion and activities that you do outside of work? And did you pick up any new hobbies during the lockdown last year?
I just probably did more of what I enjoy doing. I mean, living in the Bay Area, as you know, we have such great weather here. So I love the outdoors. So I do a lot of cycling and running in the area. I also did triathlons pre-COVID. Obviously that's kind of all gone away a little bit. So I hope to get back into that sometime, in the not too distant future. Have to start swimming again. And I also love to make ice cream. That's my big thing. And I like to experiment with different flavor combinations. Of course, I like to eat ice cream too, which is why I have to do a lot of cycling and running. But yeah, so that's, so I've continued doing those through COVID, and it definitely has helped my sanity.
No gardening, no extra baking like everybody else picks up.
No, probably. Well, I did. Okay. So on the bacon front, I did. My husband really loves bacon, but I started making Millionaire's bacon. You know what Millionaire's bacon is? Oh, so they have that. They have it at several restaurants here. Some places they actually call it Billionaire's bacon, but it's basically, thick cut bacon that's kind of glazed. At first I thought it was maple syrup. It's actually like kind of brown sugar. So it's also a little bit spicy, but it is so good. And so, without a place to go, like I'm like, okay, let me figure out if I can make it on my own. So I got a pack of, and it is really fantastic. So I have been making Millionaire's bacon, but I make a batch, I freeze it, and then it gets like parceled out slowly.
Have you put it in ice cream? You're sprinkling in ice cream? Because that would be amazing flavor.
Yes. Yes. Bacon and ice cream is really, I think there's a theme here because I do like grape nut ice cream. That's one that I like to make. So there's something about breakfast and ice cream that somehow I integrate the two.
If you can justify me eating ice cream in the morning, I'm all for it. Yes. You don't even need
it's the breakfast of champions.
Exactly.
It's got dairy, it's got protein. It's like,
yeah, it's all the pyramids.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Really, truly, thank you for joining me today. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you're super busy and probably so many things to juggle, but before we sign off, any last minute thoughts or anything you want to share with us that we can share with our members?
I can't think of anything. I think we covered a lot of ground. These are great questions. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope in the future we'll do more topics and kind of conversation pieces like this. And I think you have such great insight, especially when it comes to women in industry.
Thank you for listening to this week's Meet a Member segment, and many thanks to Sylvia Kwan for her insights. Please stay tuned for more Meet a Member interviews featured every fourth Tuesday in our weekly newsletters.